Welcome back everyone to the channel for night number 46 of Ghost Stories with Uncle 3. So the story we're diving into today was sent to me by a friend in Cambodia named Sokha. She watches my stories on YouTube and wanted to share one of her own. Now, Sokha has seen plenty of spooky stuff in her life, but the story that truly haunted her and scared her the most wasn't even her own. It was about a guy who lived in her neighborhood. When this man recounted his tale to the local kids after dark, their faces turned green with fear. I'm gonna call this gentleman Mr. Mike. Mike lived out in the country, a region where there were lots of waterways. Folks there mostly relied on farming and the plentiful seafood from the Mekong River. The houses in this area were mostly built on stilts, which was kind of unusual, but necessary because the floods at the end of the year caused the water to rise super high. If the houses weren't tall enough, they'd be swept right out to the sea. Mike lived there with his wife. This whole crazy event probably happened when he was still a young guy, sometime between 1990 and 2000. They didn't have kids yet. Mike was out farming and tilling the soil every day just to put food on the table, because life in Cambodia back then was pretty tough and poor. One day, while he was digging up the dirt to prepare for planting, Mike unearthed something strange, a flashlight. Now, if you're from Asia and over 30, you might remember this kind of flashlight. It was a vintage type, a metal one, usually white. I can't recall if it was made of iron or aluminum, but it was solid and took big, heavy batteries. Back then, if a family in Cambodia owned one of these flashlights, they were considered well off, since most poor folks relied on oil lamps or torches to get around at night. Mike was thrilled when he found it. He prized it more than gold. He cleaned it up and noticed it hardly had any rust. It looked almost new. So, he drove to the district to buy 2 huge batteries. But here's the thing. When he put the batteries in and tried to turn it on, nothing happened. It didn't work. Mike still thought it was neat though. He took the batteries out and put the flashlight on a cabinet in his living room, just as a decoration. That way, when guests came over and saw the cool, fancy flashlight, they'd think his family was doing okay. Everything was normal until one night when Mike woke up with a massive stomach ache. He had to go use the restroom, stat. He woke up kind of groggy and half asleep. Since he wasn't fully aware of what he was doing, he just randomly grabbed that old flashlight and headed out the door. Here's where it gets weird. When he flicked the switch, the flashlight suddenly turned on and glowed. Mike followed the light out to a cluster of bushes to do his business. While he was there, he didn't dare keep the flashlight on. He immediately turned it off because he was worried that if a beam of light suddenly appeared out of the darkness, people nearby would get curious and come investigate. And who wants to be seen when they are in the middle of taking care of business, right? The moment he turned the flashlight off, things got sketchy. He looked beside his bush and saw the black shadow of someone standing right next to him. Mike screamed in terror and instinctively flipped the flashlight back on. When the light came up, the shadow was gone. But that's not all he saw. He realized the bush he was sitting by was actually the yard of a stilt-house. This wasn't his house, clearly. Mike wasn't scared yet, just completely baffled. He had specifically gone to a deserted spot to do his business, How on earth was he suddenly sitting in the bushes next to someone else's house? He was terrified someone would yell at him or even beat him up for shamelessly using their yard. He thought, wait, before I left, I looked round. There was no house here. Did a stilt-house just spontaneously sprout up? He shut the flashlight off again. As soon as the light died, he heard crying coming from inside the stilt-house. It was mixed with the sound of a heated argument between a man and a woman, and he could hear a child weeping too. He figured it was a domestic fight, and the child was theirs. Mike couldn't scream or intervene, given his current, compromising position. He just had to hurry up and finish so he could run home. But before he could clean himself up, he saw something horrifying. He watched as the husband inside the house grabbed a knife and slashed his wife across the neck, sending her tumbling down the stairs. In the struggle, the wife managed to grab her husband's neck and yank him down too. The wife died instantly from the slash, but in a freak twist, the husband was impaled and killed by his own knife as he fell onto it right next to his dead wife. Then the child's crying stopped completely. Mike was in such a panic over witnessing a murder that he quickly pulled up his pants and bolted. As he ran, he flicked the flashlight on, and it stayed bright. But then came the next bizarre clue that this was something supernatural. The road he was on didn't look anything like the way home or any road in his village. Suddenly, Mike saw a slow procession of people approaching him in the distance. Terrified he might be involved in the murder, he quickly turned off the light and dove into the bushes to hide. He lay there motionless, waiting for the group to pass, thinking maybe he'd blend in with them and follow them back to the stilt-house. But when they passed, he realized these people weren't from his village. They were all strangers, and they looked horrifying. Their faces were decomposing, like bodies that had crawled out of graves. They were groaning as they walked. At this point, Mike knew these were ghosts. His fear paralyzed him. He lay still until the group had passed. Even after they were gone, he couldn't move because he realized that the ghosts were not touching the ground. They were floating toward the stilt-house where the killings had taken place. Needless to say, Mike ran like hell straight for his house. Just as strangely, the roads and the scenery immediately returned to normal and looked familiar. Mike shot onto his bed and woke up his wife. He frantically told her everything. "I just saw a murder." That husband chopped off his wife's head, and then he fell and got stabbed by his own knife. I ran, and then I saw so many ghosts. These souls floating toward that house. I was so scared, but I don't know where that house is. I've never seen it here before. Mike's wife sighed. She told him, "Go back to sleep. I think you were just confused or dreaming because you were sick. Go to sleep, and in the morning, we can check if anything happened in the village." Mike was furious at her lack of belief. He set the flashlight back on the cabinet and went outside one more time. The garden and the paths he always took were perfectly calm and peaceful. There was nothing unusual. He went back in and slept. The next morning, he checked again. Nothing strange. Mike then decided to walk over to the exact spot where he had done his business the night before. Sure enough, he saw the evidence he'd left behind. He thought, okay, I was definitely here. But last night I saw a house here. Now it's just an empty lot. What was that house? And why did I see all that? Mike kept thinking about it. That night he was sleeping, but this time, his wife was the one who got the stomachache. She picked up the flashlight to light her way. Before she could leave the house, she heard a commotion in the kitchen. Thinking it was a mouse or some critter looking for food, she went to investigate. What she saw was just as terrifying as what Mike had seen. She saw a huge pool of blood spilled all over the kitchen floor. And hanging above the stove, where Cambodian people usually hang things like garlic or onions, she saw human body parts. She screamed. Mike rushed in, and when she told him what she saw, he instantly believed her, knowing what he had experienced the night before. Mike grabbed the flashlight and shone it into the kitchen, and those terrifying images vanished. The next day, Mike went to the village gathering spot and told the story, with his wife backing him up. Of course, most people wouldn't believe such a wild tale. However, the few who believed him suggested that he go see a sorcerer or shaman. Mike actually hired one. This shaman was from a different village, so he didn't show up until the following day. Mike isn't sure if the shaman was fake or not, but the man took one look around Mike's home and declared, "There are no ghosts here. There are no spiritual phenomena whatsoever. These two are just scaring each other. If there was anything here, I would know the second I looked." The shaman then turned around and left. The villagers took this as proof that the couple was either delusional or trying to pull a fast one. Mike was angrier than ever. That night, Mike couldn't sleep because he was so upset. Even though he was terrified of ghosts, he did a brave or stupid thing. He grabbed the flashlight and went outside again to find out why this was happening to him. Creepily enough, when he went to the spot where he had relieved himself, the scene repeated itself. He saw the husband running out, chopping his wife's throat, falling on the knife, and dying. Then he saw the corpse-like people floating down the road toward the stilt-house. He ran back, screaming again, but the villagers just told him to stop lying and let everyone get some rest. "You always act like this," they said. A few people followed him to check, but once again, the stilt-house was completely gone, and they found nothing. The villagers cursed Mike and verbally abused him mercilessly. Mike was at his breaking point. Once everyone had gone back to sleep, he stomped home. He grabbed the flashlight and threw it as hard as he could against the wall, smashing it into pieces. When the flashlight shattered, Mike discovered something truly shocking. The flashlight had no batteries. Remember the detail I told you earlier? Mike had taken the batteries out right away when they first failed to work and used the shell as decoration. The two large batteries were still sitting neatly in the cabinet. So how the heck had the flashlight turned on all those nights? Mike could only guess. Maybe the flashlight contained the image or the angry spirit of a terrible crime. And maybe every time he or his wife turned it on after midnight, they were forced to see it, but no one else could. The next day, Mike took all the broken pieces up to a very old historic pagoda in the district. He showed the pieces to the chief monk to examine. When the monk sat down to meditate, he placed a hand on a broken flashlight and closed his eyes. Mike watched as the monk began to shake violently and sweat profusely. Finally, the monk snatched his hand away and said, "Yes, this flashlight is saturated with deep resentment and hatred. A horrific massacre took place in the land where you live. The husband murdered his wife and child. The monk then explained that the corpses Mike saw floating down the road were hungry ghosts. These hungry ghosts were coming to feast on the fresh souls of the recently murdered family and drag them off to become hungry ghosts themselves. But the victims' spirits managed to slip into the metal flashlight and take refuge inside before the hungry ghosts could grab them. Then Mike accidentally dug the flashlight up. The monk clarified that the flashlight could only turn on after midnight. But every time it was used, it forced the user to see the scene of the deaths that kept replaying on that cursed ground. Usually, if people die in their home, their relatives chant or light incense, which keeps the evil spirits away. But since this entire family died violently, the hungry ghosts were attracted to the scene to eat the souls. The monk said that since Mike now knew the truth, he had to help the souls pass on. First, they had to bury the shattered flashlight again. Then Mike needed to go back to the empty field and dig to see if there were 2 or 3 skeletons there. The very next day, the monk came to Mike's village to help. Because the villagers in Cambodia deeply respect Buddhist figures, the whole village joined in to dig up the empty land. Sure enough, beneath the ground, they found 3 skeletons, 2 adults and 1 small child. Finally, the villagers realized that Mike has been telling the truth the whole time. The monk performed a ceremony, cremated the bones, and took the ashes to the pagoda so that they could receive daily chants and prayers. Soka was one of the villagers who heard this amazing story. It's a wild tale about how a simple flashlight opened the door to a terrifying, forgotten crime from the past. What do you all think about this story? Let Uncle 3 know in the comments below. See you next time on night number 47